Hello, Nathan, Jeremy.
Hey, Alex. Hey,
Hello.
Jeremy. Let me go advertise this in the internal Hiero channel.
You don't want to post it in Discord?
I don't have Discord up, I guess. Do you have Discord up? Can you post it in the solo channel in Discord too while we're at it? Meeting link?
Sure, let me copy the link, I guess, right?
Yeah, just
Just
copy the link. Yeah.
let's see, copy link, copy link, I think. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Okay. And then let me do go to the solo Discord channel.
I have Discord, I just don't have it up and handy. So in other news, Alex, we don't have, there's a issue with the Go SDK that we'll need to address. And thankfully, we don't use that for solo, but the Go SDK that likes to panic. Hey, Matt.
Oh, hey Nathan.
Hey Matt.
Oh, hey Jeremy. Hey Alex.
We'll wait a little longer, see if we can get anybody. Jeremy's post in the Discord channel, see if there's any other community members that want to join. Um, Jeremy, one of the topics that I just got from Jeff Barrows, um, we can talk about here on the community call is Amazon support for the way they handle EKS. Is it EKS? It's EKS in Amazon. Sorry. It's AKS in Azure, EKS in Amazon. EKS and Amazon doesn't handle PVC support is funky in the fact that um, it doesn't handle multi-AZ EKS clusters very well.
It
Whereas
doesn't know what?
so their PVC support in EKS is questionable when it comes to multiple availability zones.
Oh,
Are explicit PVC declarations in the AZ where the machine is spun up, and there's a lot of caveats around that. And so
Uh,
I think what they're going to need from Solo is they're going to need the ability to specify taints tolerations and node selectors on a per consensus node basis, as well as probably for, well, we are, and
I think
probably
I thought we already coded that.
we have it as a global default for the deployment. I
No,
don't,
no, no. I'm saying I thought we had it so that you could specify it at a consensus node specific level. I thought we already, that was an enhancement we did. Or is it just in pipeline to do? I
I
thought,
think it's in the pipeline to do
I thought it
still.
was coded. And I don't
Well,
know how it was tested, but I think we coded it.
you're talking about affinities.
Okay. I don't know.
Yeah,
Maybe it hasn't been done. I don't know.
yeah,
Maybe just you and I talked about it.
right. So I think the thing is what we need to do is that there's we need, so what they're going to have from us is affinities on a per resource basis, per consensus node and per HA proxy and a per a few things like that. And I think what this boils down to is a set of Helm chart changes.
Right.
You know,
Well, and then solo, we just have to make sure. Well, I
right.
guess solo already takes a values file, so yeah, we just plug the chart changes.
Right, and they're already using a values file on their side, so that would be fine for them. Um, don't know that the Helm chart takes per node definitions. Definitely not for the HA proxy stuff. The HA proxy, I can tell you, I added that support, and right now it's just global, selectors that apply to all HA proxy pods as well as
Mm.
locally. So there was work, you're right, there was work done on that. I actually did that myself. And those were just global definitions. And we have Deepak. Hey, Deepak.
Hi, Nathan. Sorry, I have like out of box questions. So once you will finish your discussion, maybe I can ask. I don't want to jump in bit. I just raised my hand, so yeah.
Gotcha. So yeah, I think Jeremy, the answer there is we're gonna have to change the Helm chart to be more granular. I think is really all his ask is gonna boil down to. We already have it in there. I just don't think it's granular enough for what they're gonna need to work around the Amazon AZ stuff because they're gonna have to tack what they're basically gonna have to do is say that this consensus node is tacked to this AZ, right? Using node selectors and tolerations potentially. So I think that's it's basically there's some and or they're going to have to and the other option is they may need to provide PV custom. The other thing that they could do to work around this is they could also provide custom storage classes per zone per consensus node, as well as they may also we may also need that in tandem with the AZ selector. The affinity per node. So there's going to be possibly a couple that when the PVC storage class per zone is not something that per consensus and it's not something that we support. I'm pretty sure that one's not something we support. We might support the node selector and the tolerations per. Um, I don't know if we support affinity per, but we may need to support all the above. There's a few caveats there, so we'll need to get more details from how they want to roll that out. Because they've got a
Who's
couple.
they? Is that who needs this?
This is the SREs.
Okay, the series. Yes, that's what I thought. Is there a timeline on that? I don't know.
No, right now what Jeff was just telling me was that they discovered the issue around that, which I already knew to be the case. We hadn't solved for that. I was waiting for them to put a priority on that because they haven't been testing Amazon, but they're right now just going to dance around it by doing a single AZ deployment. So that way it doesn't matter. But we'll need to get more details from them on that one.
Okay. Uh, Deepak, I guess. Do you want to go ahead?
Yes, sir. So I just have one question. So we are planning to do a kind of like internal pen test for hash sphere with regards to solo. Also, the same setup we are planning to take ahead with external auditor, and we are thinking to take this as an opportunity to treat solo as a critical product and like use this external engagement and auditor and our external pen testing for the whole solo perspective. So I just one request, I don't want to like dependent on like any of our internal teams to set up this like this instance. So like my team has a DigitalOcean account governed by our company. So we set up some kind of like Linux boxes on demand for our like red teaming and offensive security assessment. So just want to understand, like, do we have any guidance to set up the whole solo in any like DigitalOcean account using their DigitalOcean's like Kubernetes cluster? No, not
No,
urgent, but if we
no,
can
we don't
build.
have anything documented specifically for anything like the only thing we really have documented is kind. We have some examples set up for GKE, Latitude, and AWS. Or well, actually the GKE and Latitude. I don't think the AWS one's actually got an example per se. Um, and so I mean, it probably isn't too much different, but I think what would to me be different though is that how I would set up and configure Solo for a pen test would be different from just running like single, like quick start single deploy, you know? Like there's certain additional commands that I would run to make sure it's not using generic keys and stuff like that. But I guess it just depends on what the pen test is trying to cover, because some things it wouldn't matter if they're penetration testing the ledger, then yeah, I would want to change the default keys. But if they're just penetrating testing the node software, that's one thing. If they're penetrating, testing the cluster itself, that's a different thing. Like, so it just depends on what the scope of the penetration test is.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. So first I will go and will determine the scope and then we'll decide. We have asked our Sphere team to set up one solo instance for us. They already set up, but they are figuring out, I think maybe Nathan with you, maybe they have created some request for a like box where they can give us that box as a client side customer. So yeah, we are planning to go ahead with that internally, but I don't think that whole setup will work for the external engagement. So that's why like I was trying to figure out if we can use DigitalOcean for external audit and can give them a complete separate segregated instance. But I think your points are valid. Okay.
Well, so Deepak, I think there's two things here. You know, number one is Solo is designed to work on a Kubernetes cluster. So,
Yeah.
and it's designed to work on almost, there's a few caveats as we're, based on how EKS, runs, how DigitalOcean sets up their clusters, there may be a few caveats that you might have to change some settings for. Um, but overall, the intent is that you should be able to take Solo and run it against the kind cluster, right? Which is just a pod running in a container running in Docker, right? Which is basically Kubernetes and Docker. You can run micro K8s. You can run it on you can run it on what is it? Mini S0 or K0S, which is from Rancher Team. We've tested several of those environments over. We don't test them repeatedly and frequently like we probably need to start doing, but ultimately we test those guys. We've tested them at some point. I've spun it up on a K0S cluster, which I think is from the Rancher Team. And I've run it on Minikube and MicroK8s, and we've done some testing of the various persuasions, right? On different Kubernetes clusters. We run it on GCP all the time. We've run it on EKS minus the few caveats that they're hitting with the multi-AZ stuff. But ultimately you should be able to spin it up on DigitalOcean.
Okay.
You just need a DigitalOcean Kubernetes cluster. We don't cover the case of how you get Kubernetes. Solo is not concerned with bringing Kubernetes into existence, right? You have to bring
Yeah.
the cluster. And as Jeremy pointed out, how you bring the cluster and how you define your audit scope and how you define your pen test scope is critical, because if you're pen testing the cluster itself, well, that has nothing to do with solo. That's now a pen test of the cluster, and now you're pen testing, DigitalOcean's
Well,
environment.
I wouldn't say it has nothing to do with solo, but
Well,
it,
if you're pen testing the actual cluster machines and the cluster deployment of the cluster itself, then it's not really solo related if you set up a DigitalOcean cluster, right?
there might be
Yep,
things
yep,
that
yep.
we might want to do, in solo to check certain things or to enable
Yeah,
certain things that currently we don't look at.
yeah,
So
yeah, 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 yeah.
So
Yeah,
my
yeah.
point is, if you're pen testing the actual DigitalOcean cluster deployment, you can do that with or without solo deployed on it. And the security of that cluster is going to be based on how well DigitalOcean does things. You know,
yeah,
Yeah, that's a good point. We don't want to pen test DigitalOcean's Kubernetes deployment. Yeah,
right?
good, good,
Because if you're trying
good
to
point.
pen
Yeah,
test,
yeah,
you're pen testing Kubernetes itself on DigitalOcean, you're really what that's asserting on is the quality of their deployment
yeah, correct.
of Kubernetes, which is a much different thing than pen testing the solo deployment on Kubernetes, right?
Yep,
So we have to be very clear about how we define the pen test scope.
yep,
Because
yep,
if
yep.
they're pen testing, penetration testing open ports on the DigitalOcean cluster, for example, that's not asserting anything really in terms of how Solo is doing things, right? That's asserting
Yeah,
how
yeah,
DigitalOcean and how you have it provisioned, because there are different ways you can provision DigitalOcean
yep,
and set your DigitalOcean firewall policies. If you do stupid stuff on your firewall policies, that's outside the scope of Solo,
yeah,
for example. So
yeah,
that would be, you just have to be very clear on the scope.
yep, yeah,
Really pieces you want to focus on in a pen test for Solo is you want to focus on the ingresses that Solo's using under the
yeah,
right? You want to focus on the actual consensus node, the mirror node components that are exposed to the world or exposed
yep,
to the network, right?
yeah,
You'd want to pen test the block node if you enable that.
yeah,
You want to pen
yeah,
test the
yeah,
various components. So you have to be very selective at how you scope that.
yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, good points and good, great feedback. I think I joined the right call. Cool.
yeah, the solo deployment is extremely complex infrastructure wise,
Yep,
as Georgie was pointing out to us this morning.
Well, there's complexities under the hood, right? And we hide all those complexities. Really, the big things from a pen test perspective, though, is how really, you can pen test you can pen test the consensus node with or without it being deployed via solo. Solo
yep,
makes it easy to deploy it, in
yeah,
an environment that's easy to, that you can then pen test against. There's other ingresses and HA proxy configs that don't always, and keep in mind, I don't know that our HA proxy configs are exactly like mainnet, so there's going to be discrepancies there. Now, it's important to understand if we do deploy solo and we pen test it, we find an issue with the HA proxy config, that doesn't necessarily is not necessarily representative of what it could be, but it may not be representative of what mainnet may or may not be vulnerable, because
yeah,
there are
yeah,
some differences between the configs we deploy and what mainnet has deployed. So I just want to point that out as well. It's not
Well,
any
and mainnet's not using solo or our Helm charts or any of that stuff. So
right. Well, in this case, like the HA proxy config is, we use is slightly different. It's similar to the mainnet one, but different. So
yeah. We started with their version, but we tweaked it a bit.
yeah, to support the proper stuff we need to support in a Kubernetes environment, right? So there's different pieces to that pie, but really what you're focusing in on is all the pods that we deploy. That's what should
yep,
be the scope of the pen test. Not
yeah, yeah, yeah,
not and also you have to be careful because you don't want them testing and asserting on the Kubernetes the off-the-shelf controllers we use for ingress controllers, right?
yep,
Because if they start going, well, this ingress controller is exposing port 1024 to certain things inappropriately, that's the problem of the ingress controller, which is a completely different open source project.
yeah,
And not really,
yeah,
and if it's doing bad behavior, then that's outside the scope of what even Solo has authority over potentially.
But
You
it
know,
might be something that we need to know about so that
well,
we can
right,
look at
and we
maybe
can
there's a
we can fix
workaround,
it.
or maybe we need to have it on our list to replace it with something more secure down the road if there is some.
Well, and we can do things like deploy Cilium network policies and other things to mitigate the exposure as well if we know about it. So I mean, but I wouldn't put a lot of energy into pen testing the controller with the expectation that that's representative of mainnet or something that we can actually fix. You know what I mean? That's where
Yep.
this is important, that if there is something observed there, it probably is outside the scope, and we don't want them spending a lot of time diving into the ingress controller. You know, that's a waste of
Yep.
our resources and our time, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah. I got your point. So maybe like I'm planning two pen tests. One is for the blockchain software, where like I will treat actual blockchain software like mirror node APIs, mirror node endpoints, gRPC API, and endpoints of the node and hash like Explorer. So what all components we deployed using like Solo. Solo actually is not Solo software or orchestrator is not in the scope, but the blockchain. So maybe I can utilize Solo again there, but not the Solo orchestrator, but the blockchain software. Second, like Hash Sphere. So I think they are setting up, and maybe I can loop you as well, Nathan, when like we will go with the external auditor discussion. So you can also like give your feedback or point out if we are going in the right or wrong direction as well.
Yeah, I think it really just boils down to, if the big thing you can do is avoid them wasting time on certain components, just
Yep.
having a
Yeah.
clear, because they can port forward, with Kubernetes, we can port forward and they can port forward and we can expose those explicit service endpoints that are tied to the backend pods that we care about pen testing. You know what I mean?
Yep.
That
Yeah.
way, they
Yeah.
don't waste
Yeah.
time
Yeah.
going through pieces that may or may not matter,
Yeah.
like Kubernetes, off-the-shelf
Yep.
Kubernetes ingress controllers. You
Yep.
know,
Yeah.
so we can dance around some of that to a certain extent, you know. And there's
Yeah.
stuff, you have to be careful, like on Amazon, if they're like the way that they set it up for like in Amazon and Google for these clusters on Spear is it's exposed via Amazon and GKE load balancers. And so you could waste time poking the load balancer and finding that the load balancer has a vulnerability, which, is well outside the scope of anything related to the blockchain. So we do have to be very scope oriented on what is and
Yep.
isn't in scope.
Yeah. 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 Cool. I have another question related to Solo. So I was discussing the same thing with our HashSphere team as well. So they are using, so let's say like they go to client, they use their like Solo Terraform scripts to set up the sphere for that client. Now let's say we updated the blockchain node image and maybe certain emergency page update fix. So I think like they are not clear about the updating process, downtime, and everything. Do they need to shut down the whole spheres? Need to page their solo orchestrator code with the latest image? Need to rebuild the whole sphere again and need to put up, or they can use our DevOps team's methodology for node updations. Like they can push the jar files and blockchain artifacts, release artifact inside a node, and they do not need to shut down the whole sphere. So just want to like have your understanding. Maybe they will figure out the process, but it's critical from security standpoint for me and my team to understand.
Yeah, so I mean, really, in reality, right? We support the network upgrade, just like mainnet does. That should be how they're rolling out updates at this point in time for updating the consensus node software. As for mirror node, there are ways they can update that chart. Jeremy, correct me if I'm wrong here. we haven't, do we have an upgrade command yet for that, or is it just redeploy them? So I mean, really part of that is they can redeploy just the mirror node components. Those components are all stateless for the most part, as long as they don't cream the database, you know. So really they could just undeploy and redeploy mirror node. And the same for the like the mirror node explorer component is just completely stateless. It just points at the mirror node. So they could really just uninstall and reinstall the new version with the
Talking about
command,
the
which
Explorer.
already the mirror node explorer for sure is completely
Yeah, the
stateless.
Explorer and the Relay, I think they're stateless. Yeah, and then the mirror node, to your point, you got the database. Um, the consensus node upgrade is a bit tricky because of like the upgrade itself is usually not a problem. But on certain versions that we had to go and add code, and we haven't gone through all the versions yet. So we haven't like caught up with mainnet. Right now we're like a version or two behind. Um, so, and then we've also got the so we've been working on upgrades basically. So some of it we've got, we've got it started and we've got it up to a certain point. But there's still a little bit more to do, like the latest versions of consensus node. I'm trying to think if there was any other gaps that we haven't closed yet. I think we
Yeah, what you're talking about, Jeremy, is all the transitions that have been happening around DAB and Genesis address book and all the crap in 62.
Yeah, but there was also some issues because and it wasn't exactly related. It was actually related to Solo itself because of some of our Helm chart changes. We had to basically like download some of the state, blow the pods away, and then rebuild the network, and then not the whole network, but the consensus nodes, and then redeploy the state because we broke the PVC chain. And so we had to code for that migration pattern. So, but a lot of the things like Mirror Node's got its own code to handle its own upgrades, and Consensus Node has its own code to handle its own upgrades. So, a lot of times there's not a lot Solo has to do, but occasionally they do something, like a new directory structure or something like that messes us up. So.
Well, and to answer your question, the pathway for the SREs is to use we have an upgrade command for deploying for freezing the network and doing an upgrade um, of the consensus node software. And the mirror node is, as long as you're using external database, which they are, it's simply a remove and reinstall with the new version. Same for Relay, which is completely stateless. Mirror Node Explorer, which is completely stateless. Block Node is the other one that's undefined, but SREs, that's gonna be a different deal for them that we'll have to address. We're still trying to sort. Block Node is still trying to sort out Block Node. Um, we
Yeah,
don't
and
have
it sounds like there's some problems there too, where the version of consensus node and block node have to be
to
very
be aligned.
specifically
Yeah,
lined up or something like that now.
yep. There's some things around
They've
that right
diverged or
now.
something. So
Yeah, so Blocknode hasn't even sorted out Blocknode yet, so we don't know what the future of Blocknode holds. So I really can't comment on it other than right now there's definitely
we
you look
have the ability to deploy block node and consensus node, and if they're lined up right, we might have them working together correctly. In our test harness, they work correctly together.
yeah, and Blocknode basically at this point is experimental. So I don't really have a solid line of sight on what upgrades for that one looks like yet, you know.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
I think we were
I loved the
actually
discussion.
I think we do have a PR on the block node upgrade command, but I don't know how it's being tested. So
All good. Like, love to hear that you are already ahead of this and you are already working on it. I am like aware about the freeze command with Solo. I used that freeze command when I was testing DAB with Solo, but I did not use upgrade command. Maybe when I will find time, I will also use.
And Deepak, we
Right.
have a couple different upgrade options. We have the granular pathway that Simi uses for testing the SDKs because she needs to inject her own transactions in the mix.
Yep.
And then we have the one-shot command that does it all from freeze to upgrade complete.
Ah, nice.
And that's the one that the SRE team is probably going to need to use. Just simply,
Cool.
they don't necessarily need to be in control and they don't need to craft custom transactions at this point in time. that the reason we have it broken down in a granular step-by-step process is mainly because when Simi's testing the SDKs, she needs to run it up to a certain point, then the SDK needs to craft and send the transaction because that's the actual code under test. And then she needs to have Solo do something else and then send the next transaction in the sequence. You know what I mean? So
Yep.
whereas Solo has a one-shot command that'll do it all and send the transactions. So that's really, more or less the command that the SREs are going to want to leverage is just let Solo have the control to do the upgrade. In the future, there might be a case where we don't hold the keys. And so it requires some additional lifting because there has to be a customer signed transaction, but that's in the far, far future. And that's a whole different gamut that we can address when we get there, in which case we probably already have it covered by the broken down commands that we offer today. You know what I mean? The granular commands for semis testing probably already cover that case. Because really what that would be is that if the users were in control of the accounts required to do upgrade, privileged accounts, then they would submit like with the TTV2 tool, and they would send that to the network. And then we'd run the next solo command. And then we'd submit the next pre-signed transaction, run the next solo command. So it would be the same effective behavior as what Semi does in her test pipelines. So I think we already have that case as well covered by Solo. So I think really it boils down to we haven't had an opportunity to have those discussions at length with the SRE team. And part of the problem is I've been told to minimize, our time spent, there. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Got it. 100%, sir. Yep. Yeah. I was discussing with Jeff. I think Jeff is not aware about all the upgrade and everything. Maybe their SREs are already aware. So, yeah. All right.
Yeah. So I mean, we need to. I know Jeff wants to book time with me to talk about upgrades. But there's tool's gonna impose some limitations on how much we can continue to spend on, um, you know,
Yeah. Yeah. Got it. You already point out
Yeah.
this to me earlier. Yeah. Got it. Yeah.
yeah. So again, that's there's at some point the SREs need to actually engage and learn
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
more
Yeah.
about the
Yeah.
consensus node, just like your team has.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, what you do to help and support them is
Yeah.
different from what, we can do to help and support them because my time is getting more
Yes.
limited. And by the way, Deepak, outside the scope, we need to have a conversation about some other projects that we just got handed.
Cool, sir. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So
We can
basically,
connect. Yeah.
in terms of everything going on, the focus on solo as a whole is quality of life this quarter. For the internal team. What Jeremy and his team are working on is quality of life enhancements. Um, and we've got some restructuring to do as part of that on the syntax of some of the CLI commands. So there will be some semi-breaking changes in the releases this quarter to how the CLI syntax looks. There will be some. Right now, Solo, I don't think supports 63 or 64. And Jeremy, I had an interesting conversation the other day as well that we need to follow up on with Michael Tinker. But it sounds like in 64 or 65, the whole Genesis network, Jason, has gone away now. So that's a whole nut. I know you're going to be thrilled about that. So I don't, there's some, it may,
Yeah, no, because we put a lot of work into that.
yeah. And
I'm
we're
sure his team does too, of course, but
I know. And there's also some concerns that they're still not initializing the address book correctly, internal on 101, 102. we're still having to fix it up with Yockley after the fact.
Uh,
Prior, so there's
isn't it making its way over to Marinade? I thought I have a. Oh, maybe. Well, you know what? We don't have all the latest versions in our test harness. That
right.
actually could be causing some failures that I
Well,
haven't.
I think there's some concern, there's some regressions in the consensus node where it's not even populating 102, 101, 102 correctly now again.
But I thought I had maybe Matt Hess had added some regression and tests to make sure that it get broke again. I thought.
I
Well,
thought that was the
I
case.
had I had him add some tests in last time to make sure that it didn't break again. So, but I don't know. Hmm. Who knows?
Yeah,
Well,
I mean,
I keep my eye out because I was gonna once I get through with some of this, I was doing some project planning. I was also gonna go in there and get us try to slowly get us upgraded to the latest versions of everything because we're a bit behind.
yeah, I think we need to definitely probably just schedule some time with Matt Hess and Neha and Tinker um and get line of sight on the 64, 65 changes. Because I think that, and I know right now we only, and DPAC, just to keep in mind, right now we only have effective support for, I think, 61, possibly 62 in solo.
So
This
uh,
node.
yeah, so my team is planning to shift our testing from local node to solo slowly. So what exactly is happening with local node? Whenever we find any bug, like local node team is not like supporting to fix many of the bugs. So we got stuck with our testing. So we are slowly trying to shift to solo for our day-to-day testing as well for releases. So if we don't support, can we still point out a tag or release version image to solo and can build and can use and do the testing, or it is not completely possible?
Solo can use almost any version that's published to
Ah,
the public
awesome.
registry. However, that being said, what I'm saying is 63 and 64 and possibly even 62 may not function as expected.
Ah, some changes and some things will break. Okay, got it. Okay.
Yep. I mean, so technically you can provide, the default version that Solo defaults to right now is I think 61.4, right? Because that's what we've been testing with internally. We know it's highly stable, and provides the best user experience with Solo because that's what we've certified. Um, you can, run it within the tagged public builds, so anything that's not a commit-ish hash. You can even run it with a commit-ish hash, and I know Alex here on the call test with the head of main too. And I know he's had to make, I think, a few minor tweaks potentially for some of his testing in the past for some of these versions as well. Some of it's made it back into solo, some of it may be in his testing branch. But all I'm saying is if you run it with this versions past 61, we don't have a strong guarantee, but definitely if you find an issue by doing so, file an issue so that we
Yeah.
know about it
Okay.
and we can look at addressing it. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
we're definitely going to have to support versions past 61. We're not saying we're not. We haven't tested and certified, and there may, like I said, there's some changes that I was made aware of just the other day, potentially in 64, that may be undoing some of the stuff that was put in 63. So those are the kind of upstream changes that we just are the victims of, that we have to, and we're finding out about it literally into last week. So we don't, you know what I mean? So it may or may
Yeah.
not function as expected.
Yeah. Got it, sir. Will not bother your team much if we find anything. We will just go
Well,
silently file a issue.
yeah, file an issue on the Hiero solo repo,
Yeah.
Hiero ledger / solo repo, so that way we're aware of the issue
Yeah.
and we
Yeah.
will triage it as we can, get to it because we're definitely going to have to address it at some point or another,
Yeah.
But again, I think we're probably okay in many ways. But the problem is too that a lot of these things like around the Genesis JSON and stuff, those issues do not manifest unless you're running mirror node. And a lot of our
Created in a typical 3D universe.
one second. Dang Alexa. A lot of the a lot of our nightly tests do not cover mirror node at the moment. So and do not spin up a mirror node. So we don't have line of sight on some of those changes. That's where most likely it's going to break around this Genesis JSON change potentially. That being said, does anyone have any other topics they want to discuss?
Maybe when we meet next time, or not next time, after 2 weeks, can we discuss something about Solo and its supply chain attack, and can just brainstorm if we find any gaps, or just kind of like a discussion.
Well, we can do that right now. We have 15 minutes left on the call, so
No, not now. I think
well,
I need a full call. I need your full brain.
well, I mean, to be honest, in short and sweet, right? There's Solo's broken. Solo's really a deployment tool, right?
Yeah.
So the supply chain attacks on Solo, are present, right? But Solo is of course built using npm or built using Node.js, which of course depends on other npm packages. We try to be very diligent about making sure that we're using the least amount of packages possible. There's certain
Are we pointing Solo to JFrog, or still pulling everything from the registry like npm main, or
So Solo is pulling through JFrog. Right,
awesome? That's
right.
awesome.
It doesn't. Yes, it is, but it isn't. We don't yet have JFrog fully configured to automatically block
Ah,
things.
okay.
And what that's on the project list for this year to do is to get JFrog to go in and set up all those policies and
Yeah,
set up a way for engineers to request exceptions to allow
yeah.
new dependencies to be added. But ultimately it is pulling, so we do get the X-ray scans, but we don't have, we're not like blocking GPL packages out the gate, or there's some of the
Okay, okay,
automatic blocking that we can do, right? So like we can enforce license restrictions and other things. We can
okay.
take AGPL
Yeah,
licenses out the gate, just not let those dependencies be added. All of our dependencies on Solo have been thoroughly reviewed. I don't think any of them are GPL or AGPL. If there are, it may be a GPL or LGPL one coming in through the Kubernetes side, as we do depend on the Kubernetes official client implementation.
okay.
Uh,
Do we do any kind of like artifact verification for the blockchain images? Like we are fetching mirror node image, we are fetching consensus node image. So once we fetch using Solo, do we do any artifact verification or checking using any checksum SHA, or some other like
So yeah, to answer that, for the mirror node and mirror node explorer and the other components outside of consensus node, even if we wanted to, we don't have a great way because those Docker containers are all non-deterministic. You know
oh,
what I mean?
okay. Yeah,
Right?
yeah,
Only
yeah,
thing we
yeah.
can validate is that the hash in the registry says it is what it is. You know what I mean? We
Okay.
don't have any way
Yeah,
we don't have any guarantees externally, that those are built, that the layer hashes are, we can do that. We're not yet using we also are not yet using the deterministic consensus node image in Solo. So that also limits our ability. We can verify that those build package. Now, again, those build packages are hosted on builds.atera for those. And we are in
I
we
yeah, you
we control those. We have full control over what's published there, right? So
okay.
we generate the hash in so we trust those intrinsically ourselves because we are the ones that are also responsible for generating those. So I mean, in terms of we generate a GPG signed SHA-256, so we can validate that on the build zips, when we download a build zip image. I don't know if we do, I don't think we do the GPG verification, but I believe we do we check the SHA hash.
Yeah, I think Shahaz is also at least good. If we don't do anything, then SHA is a like good layer. Okay, cool.
So
Yeah.
and I think we do check the SHA hash before we unpack the zip file, just to make sure we got a valid download too, among other things, and didn't download a corrupt zip that doesn't even unpack, Um,
Yeah.
but again, we don't always we don't validate the GPG signature, which we could. But the goal here is that Jeremy and I were talking about this morning on our call right before this one, in the fact that we do want to also validate, switch the deterministic image, and that way that allows us to have greater validation. But really, Deepak, the thing that we lack on the deterministic image is no one else builds it. We build, we publish it. No one else.
Yeah.
We can self-validate it, and we run a series of self-validations on it when we do build it. We run
Yeah.
additional runners, one on GitHub infrastructure and another one on our infrastructure that take the original built image and rebuild it again and validate it again to make sure it's good. But that's still not 100% guarantee until we have more council members also building,
Yep.
publishing their layer hashes.
Yeah. I'm just thinking from the hash sphere perspective, if we can inbuilt the validation in
Well,
solo
I think
orchestration, then they may relay and they
well,
may.
I think what we do there, Deepak, for HashSphere is we should get them to build on two different other CI platforms like GCP's build tooling and Amazon's build tooling for the
Okay.
deterministic image. Then we could give them assurances because they
Oh, so you are saying that instead they will pull our deterministic images, they will build their own.
They should build their own. At least what I'm saying, Deepak, right now is we build the only deterministic image, right? And we
Yeah.
publish it to our registry, right?
Yeah.
But there's no one else out there also building it on different hardware, different CI platforms, conferring that they're getting the same answers that we are. So if SRE team wants to verify and make sure that they have a good build, they should build it on Amazon and they should build it on GCP. CI systems separately, independently, and then we can compare the layer hashes that we got with the layer hashes they get, and then we can assure the SRE team that what they're getting from us is a good build.
Ah, long process. But I think that's the most reliable one usually. Yeah. Okay.
Well, they're easier to onboard. Getting the SRE team to build it on two different CI systems is a
Yeah.
lot easier than getting the councils to do this.
Yep. 100%.
Ultimately,
100%. Yeah.
ultimately,
Yeah.
long poll is sometime next year. We would like to have all the council members, or as many as possible, building independently on their own CI infrastructure,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
producing and publishing to their own registry the layer hashes and the layers of the image that they built, from the tag in our repo. And,
Yeah.
and that way we can all confer, and the council can all confer that we all got the same layer hashes. So the deterministic image really doesn't bring much security to the table until we're building it on multiple systems and different systems, you know,
Yep. Yeah.
across the board.
Yeah.
And multiple people are conferring that they're getting the same thing we're getting.
Yeah.
But it is
And
provable.
and
And they can
and
go back
who
and build,
who?
they could go back and build any of the old versions to improve it. You know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah.
So it's not just something that starts going forward. If they want to build backwards in time to confer that our published deterministic image for older versions is also valid, they can. You know what I mean?
Yep.
But I think that's the first thing is we get the SREs to build it independently twice on two different systems on two different cloud environments and confer that, then we at least have they get the same hash that we got independently, and we can all be assured that what they're publishing, they can be assured themselves that what they're publishing is legit.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's the first low-hanging fruit that we should hit now, then versus asking council to start building. Because if they can do
Yep.
that and confirm that, and then we can then start onboarding councils, and we can take what they did on GCP, Amazon, and extrapolate that out to other systems. So
Yeah.
I think that's the real thing. Because even when Solo incorporates support, if the only thing we're checking against is the layer hashes we got, then we're not really any better off than where we are with the build image checking our own hashes that we got of the build zip. You know, so
Yeah.
it's going to take that extra validation where they're validating the deterministic build too, and then we all get the same answer.
Got it. Got it. And who builds the mirror node and other images? Their
That's
own
all happening.
team?
That's CI happening on their teams, and their
Oh, okay.
images are not also their images are not deterministic either. So we would need to do some support and help getting them to build deterministic image. Blocknode
Okay.
is building a deterministic image. So
Nice.
Blocknode team uptook our prior art, and we worked with them to get theirs because theirs was new development. They should be building a deterministic image on Blocknode. The other components that aren't Blocknode and aren't consensus node don't yet have deterministic images. You know,
Yeah.
so we'll have to, work that out over time. With those teams to get their images building deterministically. And there's a few. Docker is not the easiest thing to do a deterministic build on. The other thing too, Deepak, is like with Mirror Node, they have 3 different programming languages. They've got Gradle builds, Java code, which is fairly easy to make deterministic with some minor tweaks here and there to their Gradle build. But then they have NPM and they have Golang. Thankfully, as long as you're using Golang above 1.16, 1.16.x series or above, the builds naturally are deterministic for Golang binaries, but NPM is a much different ballgame because they're using things like Vite and some of the other pieces involved there
Oh, okay.
that do optimizations to shrink and minify the stuff, but minification is not exactly deterministic. So we'll have to that's a kind of a one-off situation, because if your build of your source code does not produce the same binary output every time, there's no way you can expect to get a deterministic Docker container.
Yeah.
So it has to be up the entire food chain. Now, I'm going to reiterate as well, the deterministic image in of itself doesn't eliminate supply chain issues for the actual consensus node or mirror node software itself or block node software itself, right? It eliminates supply chain issues tied to the build process. So
Yeah, correct.
it makes sure that you can certify that nothing was injected during build time. But
Yeah.
if source code that you're building from says use this version of dependency upstream
Yeah.
and it's bad, right? That there's nothing that the deterministic build is going to be deterministically bad across the board.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? If the actual Java dependency, if they're depending on malicious version 559 of log4j, and that was in the build Gradle build source code that said build this version using this version of log4j, and we build using that version of log4j and ship that version of log4j into the deterministic image. Anybody else also building that same version of log4j is also probably going to use the malicious version, get the same answer.
Yep.
So
Yep.
the deterministic build in and of itself doesn't protect from intentionally specified upstream dependencies, downstream dependencies that are in the build manifest and specified to be used. All the deterministic build guarantees is that nothing was injected and that the CI runner or other infrastructure the build occurred on wasn't compromised and didn't inject malicious code during build time. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's important, and it means that you have reproducible deterministic builds that you can then, prove. And the other thing is you can prove that given the same source inputs, that this code is not tampered, the container image hasn't been tampered with post deployment. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's really about deterministic builds are about number one, certifying that multiple people can get the same answer using different hardware and different environments, so that you know that nothing during the actual build process itself was compromised. And then you can assure yourself that the container images being distributed are genuine, because you can build the original source for that container, independently, deterministically, and get the same answer and compare your answer to their manifest,
Yeah.
and ensure yourself that that image hasn't been tampered with post build.
Yeah.
And that no one's lying to you and injecting code post build. So that's really the benefit of the deterministic build, you know.
Yeah.
Um, but it doesn't solve for the deeper supply chain problem, which is my Java code says it depends on this version of log4j, and this version of log4j either is old and has CVEs that are being
Yeah.
extended, or is actually intentionally that particular build of log4j was compromised because log4j's repo was compromised,
Yeah. 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 100%. Yep.
So again, that's where the JFrog and strict admission controls, and version fixing and those other kind of things that come in during the build time and when developers are choosing downstream dependencies that also have to be in place,
Yeah.
and some of that kind of stuff really doesn't work in the open source realm. So we have to be careful what we do with like HCN and these other projects, including Solo, that are in the open source community on Hiero. So having strict change, for a private project in an org, having a strict change control process where we block any dependency that's not previously approved being added is easy to do
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and a viable option. And you just have
Yeah.
your emission, JFrog say, nope, we're not taking anything downstream that's not already pre-approved, It can be
Yeah.
done, but someone's got to foot the bill for JFrog.
Yeah, that would be, I think you are right. That would be a huge change from the org perspective, and developer will make noise if they cannot update their dependency immediately. And they
Well,
need someone to approve
it can work.
before they.
It can work, and I mean, really, ultimately, it can work in an open source project. I think the big thing is going to boil down to whose JFrog instance are we using and
Yeah.
who's paying the bill. Is really what it would boil down to, because we already have it in Solo, and we can do it for Solo, and right now there's some around how we're set up with Hiero at the moment. There's some contention around that, in terms of LF really doesn't want LF is okay with us providing all this expensive infrastructure, but then again, they're really not because it's single vendor lock-in, you know.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it's a double-edged sword that we're riding the razor's edge right now. And at some point, the problem is LF doesn't provide any funds to pay for JFrog or any of these tools or the Latitude environment that we run all our CI in. So technically, all these Hiero projects right now, if Hashgraph says we're done, we're walking away from them, they're screwed, which goes against
Yeah.
left mandate and charter to a certain extent.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah. Got your point.
these are all exceptions approved by Thingamabopper, right? And
Yeah.
it's either up to Hashgraph to foot the bill or Hedera to foot the bill because LF doesn't provide any of these infrastructure or services. So again, this is one of those things that, I could see if the maintainers of Solo and these other projects in Hiero went out and got independent donations from IBM, Google, and other folks, and they said, okay, we have all this pool of money, we're going to spend it on JFrog, we're going to set up a policy where we have a procedure for any new dependency or change in version of a dependency has to go through an approval process where the actual project maintainers approve it. That's doable, and that's something that actually PyTorch has done. They're an open source
Yeah.
part of the LF community. They had a major scare where a white hat hacker legitimately was found an exploit through there, wormed his way and basically owned them and all their source code, all their repos. He had control of everything all the way down their CI runners, and he owned them. And he could have been malicious about it, but he properly reported, and it was a big, he was a legitimate guy, not out to cause harm. He was just figuring out if he could, because the curiosity kills the cat.
Yeah.
And he properly disclosed, and made sure that they had it all fixed, and he helped them sort it out before they made any sort of public disclosures. But that could have been catastrophic for them. So they've started to really, on the PY Torch team, they've implemented that policy where no new code, no new dependency emissions unless approved by maintainers. And they're taking those kind of steps, but they're also a well-funded project that they gets lots of donations.
Yeah.
So
Right.
they can afford to do things like buy JFrog instances. And LF supports them in that, and LF can help them do that, but someone has to foot the bill because LF doesn't pay that bill.
Yeah.
And so either Hiero needs independent donations or, but the problem is LF doesn't provide any real serious infrastructure management. So they basically push it back onto the maintainers. So if there's not a maintainer who can set all that up and run that, then some of those projects somewhat are SOL. You know what I mean?
Yep. Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
So again, it's a weird dichotomy on how LF does things in some regards.
Yeah.
Clips Foundation provides a lot more structure in that regard. LF brings to the table quite a few tools like JFrog and other things that they just pay for as part of the LF Eclipse Foundation.
Yeah.
She even goes so far as to mandate you will use these things. So LF is a bit different structure than Eclipse to some extent. But anyhow, all things considered, I think really at this point, Deepak, supply chain is a huge conversation that we can have on the next week's call and go into some more detail about, or the 2-week call from now to go into how Solo addresses it at different levels. I kind of
Cool,
touched
sir.
the surface, but that's something we can put more effort into
Yep.
in terms of presenting, and what our future plans are to address that. But ultimately, Solo is just as a tool for actuating deployment, just as Terraform and Ansible are to a certain
Yep.
extent. So ultimately, Solo cannot be all under the hood. Solo is not 100% and can never be responsible for the actual products it's deploying in terms of their final supply chain security stance. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
We have to just be careful in how we define that and draw the line. Like
Yep.
itself has to be careful of supply chain security because it is source code, it is being built, it is using third-party libraries that we're not going to rewrite the entire Kubernetes API library, for example. So there's just some things
Yep.
we're not going to put forth the effort to reinvent the wheel internally,
Yep.
on because it would be a huge undertaking and it's a project in and of itself. So we do have to have some external dependencies, unfortunately.
Yep.
So
Yep.
that being said and all, we do need there's the aspect of supply chain security in Solo. Now, Solo is supply chain security. Jeremy and I and the team have all been very, very careful on what we admit into,
Yep.
in terms of third
Yep.
dependencies, and we do a pretty thorough look and see and review of those dependencies, and we are very careful about updating versions, and we are running those through JFrog where JFrog is scanning them. So again, we do have a pretty good solid foundation on Solo itself for supply chain security, and we've
Yep.
written a
Yep.
bunch of internal code in some cases to avoid pulling in third-party dependencies. And we have reinvented the wheel where it was easy enough and made sense to do.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
So again, that all being said, we do need to look at how, and there's a good point there in how we are ensuring, at least from the seller perspective, that we're getting components that are not completely compromised if there are published ways to verify them.
Yep.
Third-party
Yep.
pieces that we're deploying. And I think part of that comes into ultimately security needs to work with those third-party components, like Miranode and stuff to get deterministic builds, because it's really not. And I say this lovingly, Deepak, Solo should not be the one driving those conversations.
Yep, 100%, 100%. I was not aware that mirror node team is not building deterministic, but thanks for pointing out. Maybe I will go and review their whole pipeline and then point out that they need to.
Well, it's more than just the CI pipeline. CI
Yeah,
pipeline is not really, it's their Docker file definitions, it's how they actually compile their code. It's
yeah, whole build compilation.
right. It's from start to finish, right? How
Yeah,
they
yep,
pull in
yep,
their dependencies. Like
yep,
some things like like NPM, for example, Deepak, you can
yep,
specify version ranges that are allowable. So it can
yeah,
pick version in that range and not a specific version. So again, there's you can use like anything greater than version 1, 2, 3, 4. And every time you build that, it's non-deterministic because if there's a newer version out, it picks it up. You know what I mean?
yeah.
And that's where uh, it has to be all the way down to the build system level for the individual languages. You know,
Yeah.
like Rust code. Depending on how Rust code is built or cross-compiled, it may or may not be deterministic
Yeah,
and other things. So again, there's a couple languages that were built around deterministic builds, like Golang. That's been one of their big things is making sure that they can give it the same source code input, the same go.sum file, and it always produces the same binary output. The Google team over there running Golang has been very, very careful to make sure that they had a point in time on versions prior to 1.15 that they did break their own determinism. uh, and they vowed never to do that again because it caused pain for everybody. So there are tools like Golang and languages like Golang, which are very, very concerned about that. And then there are other languages like Java that, one of the caveats on all of our Java builds, Deepak, is you have to build the source code to be deterministic. Your CI environment has to build it with the same major version of Java. You can't suddenly bump to Java 22 and expect to get the same jar files, so
yep,
there has to be some external fixing. The other thing too with Docker is you also have to use the same build kit version. So there actually is infrastructure pieces that have to be the same in order to get reproducible builds out of these things. So it does matter all the way up and down the food chain, including the CI pipelines. So it's something that is definitely takes a good deal of effort, and really security should be the one to spearhead that with these other projects that aren't building deterministically.
yeah,
Which I know is putting more work on you guys, but that's really the reality.
yeah.
And I think we're over time, so Deepak, we can talk more at length next time about this.
Cool, sir. Yep.
And maybe Jeremy and I will put together a little bit of a slide or something on this, since this was brought up this time. But let's call it a wrap, and we will sync up in 2 weeks.
Thank you so much. It was a productive call. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good one, guys.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.